Silence can be an awkward thing. So it depends really on the context where you're in. If you're in church, you're expected to be silent except when you're praying. If you're in the opera or in theater, it's full of expectations. If you're maybe in a job interview and there was a question asked to you, you should answer it. That can be quite awkward. And if you're doing a presentation on how to create communication and you don't have the right answers, that can be very awkward. So breaking the silence is an important part of communication. Right now, I'm kind of jittery, kind of nervous, because this is now my flock for these 2 days. I want to be part of that flock. Maybe they laugh at me, maybe I'm exposed as not being interesting, I'm boring. Or maybe not. Maybe I have something to say. Maybe I'm just stealing 20 minutes of your time and then that's it. You forget about it. So how do we create communication? I'll talk a bit about my professional background. Johanna already mentioned that I've been working in technical sales. And I've been doing that actually for 20 years in different companies, mostly in the IT sector. And I always thought this is an interesting job. You actually get into contact with people through the technology. And I was doing, when we say technical sales, what they really mean is I'm telling people why we have the best software in the world. And depending on the company you work in, you should tell that to everyone, obviously, because everyone should buy your software. But I was lucky enough to work in an environment where actually it was valued to not say this when it's not true. So I've been in sales situations where we're trying to sell software to someone, or you want to sell software. And my colleague, that was actually the very first sales pitch I went to 10 years ago with his colleague. And he went out, and there's 15 people sitting in a boardroom, and they're explaining their needs and requirements, their problems that they want to be solved by us. And after about 5 minutes, he closes his laptop, looks to his sales colleague and says, "Do you have anything else to do today? We're done here." And that was the beginning of a very long sales relationship, a customer relationship there. Because we ended this sales pitch there, but the next year they came back to us and said, "You guys, you had this thing that you wanted to give to us and we couldn't use it at that time, but now things have changed." So by being honest, by being candid there, we had really built a relationship. And that's something that's very, very unusual in my experience in sales or in trying to sell your products to someone in this classical environment. So, and other stuff I did there was workshops and trainings, which are also sometimes a bit difficult if people want to use your solutions and they run into problems and you have to explain to them why it's not working like they understand it. And there was a lot of communication breakdown happening there because obviously there is an expectation and you cannot solve this. So you have to explain to people why what they want will not be happening. And that's not making people happy, obviously. So, as I said, in this environment, I had the opportunity to work not as the classical salesperson and promising everything and anything just to get the contract done, but actually to work with people and understand their requirements and their needs and what they would actually want to solve, and then see, can we do that? And if not, telling them, no, we can't, and maybe tell them somebody else can or nobody can. That's one half of my last 20 years of experience. And the other half was designing and playing LARPs. And in doing that, I learned a lot about roles and realities and what Havik was talking about a lot, about the construction also of realities. And that's what you do in LARPs. You design an experience, but you also design a world, a reality for a short time. So you play this role inside this environment and everybody else is playing their roles and it's true for that time. if it works. In a lot of these games, it's about conflict. External conflicts, there might be some fighting going on, it might go to war or stuff like that, but also a lot about internal conflicts, which is something I got more and more interested in exploring in these games, as a designer, but also as a participant. In like 5 years ago, me and 3 friends, we bought a house together. And the idea was to have this community of people living in this house and having a global connection, because everybody was working sometimes in foreign countries for sometimes a few weeks, sometimes a few years. I'm living now in Tanzania. So we had this idea of there is a safe harbor where we could go to when we come back to our home country of Germany. And there will always be people there who welcome you. And it didn't work out. Actually, I lost a friend through this whole process because there was a complete communication breakdown. We didn't really had understood what it means not only to live together, but to own something together, to have this responsibility together, and dealing with the issues that come up through this. I had a lot of, for me personally, I had a lot of personal problems at that time, and I decided to do something about that. So I had there was a lot of fighting going on, not physical, but not pleasant at all. And I decided to change something about that. And I found a way for me to do that. Although I was living in Tanzania, and to be quite honest, the infrastructure for anything like psychotherapy or similar things is not very good there. So what I did is actually go to a place in Europe where I could go for 10 days and meet other people and find a solution for problems. And what I did is I went to a place called Altersee in Austria. And it's a place where a technology or a method called group analysis is practiced. So, I mean, traditionally group analysis is what you, if you know a bit about psychotherapy, it's this thing where everybody sits in a circle and you talk about everything. That's what you do. And it's this cliche, we can talk about everything, and actually it is. That's how it works. That's not really what I expected, but I didn't really have big expectations when I went there. The interesting part about this for me was that actually there is the group in this context is the analyst. So there is this herd competence in the room, and the psychotherapists that are present only serve as facilitators. They're not the ones telling you, have you thought about this? How about changing this, or what do the others think about that? That's not what they do. That's what other participants do. So it's your flock that you build there, your group that tells you, that wasn't a good idea. Maybe you should try it this way, or exactly that is the way how I felt. So you find a lot of comfort there. And the idea behind this is to actually let yourself go by being as honest and as candid as possible. Now, in a 12-people group, that's something you can probably imagine happening, although you can probably imagine communication breakdowns in even smaller groups. What really got me was when this whole workshop had like 12 of these groups. So there was 150 people, participants in this, plus psychotherapists, plus people just watching what was going on and documenting. And then about once per day, all of these people came together in a huge room. And there was circles and circles of chairs there. And everybody sat down for 1.5 hours. And the same thing happened in this group. With 150 people, there were people talking about issues very personal and very deeply and very openly. And it worked. There was things being talked about, which one of the things is you shouldn't talk about the actual things happening there, but I'm trying to tell you just that there were serious issues there, and people were sometimes hurt and insulted in a way that they left the room, and then they came back at some other point. And the whole idea about this 150 people, as they call it, large group, came from a psychotherapist who's also an Austrian Jew that had to migrate out of the country at the end of the Second World War, and then came back and decided at this place where, first of all, a lot of Nazi greats had their vacation places, their vacation homes, and also where there is salt mines, where a lot of the stolen art was stored. At this place, he wanted to place a vision of a new way of dealing in society with each other. And that was the idea behind this large group. Something we can do with 2 people, something we can do with 12 people, we can also do with 150, with thousands of people. These workshops have been going on 2 times a year for 40 years now. So you can imagine how many people have experienced this and how many exchanges have happened there. So to me, this was a profoundly changing experience, not only personally because of the issues I thought I had and had to deal with, but also seeing society in a different way. And one of the interesting, I want to talk about 2 interesting concepts here in group analysis. One is that when there are mental health issues in group analysis, there's a few theorists that understand or see it this way, that any mental health issue is a sign of a disturbance in the whole group. And usually that is your primary group, that is your parents and you. There is some issue there, but it can be other groups as well. And if you go a bit away from mental health issues now and look at problems in groups, then you can quite often understand that sometimes a person behaves in a way that is a problem for a group, so communication doesn't work there. But quite often, somebody will bring up a subject that maybe somebody else or others in the group have already felt as well, and somebody will bring up this subject. Not everybody can do that, and sometimes somebody will point out, I don't think he or she is feeling right now. There's something wrong here. We shouldn't do this, or maybe we should change something. And that's an interesting understanding of group dynamics. That's one thing. The other thing that I found very interesting is a concept that you probably all know, but I didn't have a word for it before, and that's in communication, just to stay in contact. And to stay in contact means not physically and not eye contact necessarily, but to stay on a common subject, on a common idea of exchange of ideas. So when I'm talking to you and you're talking to me, and then we realize we're like this, talking not about the same thing, that's when we're not in contact. And in whatever situation I am, be it in a business situation, in the sales situation, or is it in your personal relationship, or in a group of people, or with you here right now, if I'm not in contact with you, then it'll just go over there and you will just leave the room and be bored. Or maybe you just wait until I'm finished and you can go to lunch. Then we don't have a communication. Obviously, this is quite one-directional right now, but there is stuff coming back from you to me. Not talking, but I can see you smile, or I can see you nod, or look at your iPhone, and maybe that's a different message there. So this is something which if I go back now and look at the 3 things I try to highlight here, my sales experience, the LARP experience in designing experiences, and this group analysis, if you tie that back together, for me, there's something happening which we can use in multiple contexts to get into contact with people and to stay in contact. And that's something, here's the word. That's something we can use when designing experiences and designing interactions. But it's also something that we can personally use there. So I would like to try something out with you, and that is an experiment in basically what group analysis does. So I first would like to try to explain the rules to you of this whole process. And after I explain the rules, or maybe in between as well, but after I explain the rules, we will have the chance to leave the room and just say, this is not my thing, I'm not interested, or I want to do something else. Or you stay in the room, but then I ask you to stay in the room until this is finished. So we have an agreement on it starts here and it ends here, and as long as I'm part in the beginning, I try to be part until the end. If something happens in between and you think you can't, then you can't. But that's the agreement. So the rules, and that's basically from what group analysis usually does, is there's 4 rules. First of all, there's confidentiality. What we will do is we will talk about things. Hopefully you will talk, maybe I will talk, maybe nobody will talk. But whatever will be said during that time is confidential. It's not supposed to leave this room at all. And if you talk about it outside of this room, you're breaching confidentiality. It's your social punishment that you will receive or feel, your guilt. We cannot stop you from doing that, or I cannot stop you from doing that, but it's the agreement that we have if you take part in this experiment. The second one is, I already touched upon that, is reliability. Usually in group analysis, you also try to be there every time, regularly. Here we just have one session, and that's maybe 5 minutes long. And I ask you to stay for that whole time and be there for the whole time. And maybe just listen, maybe contribute, whatever you like to do, whatever you choose to do. So be there for the whole experiment. That's what I ask you. No touching. Well, maybe that's not that important in this environment, but if you think about that, people in group analysis, they usually talk about very sensitive subjects, very personal subjects, and then somebody might be aggressive, or somebody just might want to give someone comfort and hug them. And actually, what you try to do is not to do that. And the interesting part here is, this is channeling the experience. It's trying to transform the experience from a physical and very, encompassing your body, to something rational and maybe emotional as well, but trying to understand what's going on with you and putting that into words, and thus giving everybody else a chance to understand that and exchange with you. If you hug someone, it's something between you two. If you say, I feel sorry for you, I would like to give you comfort, then everybody can share in that. So no touching. And that's also a rule called abstinence here. So usually in this environment, you're not supposed to talk about things outside of the group, and also not to have social contact outside of the group, which is an interesting thing, because the idea behind this is, first of all, when I stay inside the group and don't have social contacts outside, then I keep every little piece of dynamic inside the group. And everybody else will realize that. If I have a talk with 2 or 3 or 5 other people outside, the other people in the group will not have a chance to witness that and be part of it. So you keep it there. And the other one is that, I forgot that. No, it doesn't matter. Never mind. Okay, so the fourth rule is that the group is the therapist, and that comes back to what I said earlier. It's not me telling you anything. And obviously we're not doing therapy here, but it is therapy if you can talk about things. If you like to say something, you say something, and if you like to reply to something, you reply to something. The general rules of behavior are still true. So if you interrupt someone, that might be considered impolite or even rude. If you shout at someone, the same. But it's your choice. And the idea behind this is to use the space we have and say something. We quite often had this today, or also yesterday, that the microphone is going around. And nobody wants to say something. It's very awkward. I didn't say anything. And sometimes you feel, when I'm saying something, I'm imposing myself on everybody else. I'm taking away, or it might be stupid what I'm saying, or not. I don't know. So you're not saying anything. And that's perfectly okay. But maybe you just take the chance and say something and see what happens. So this is what I like to propose now. For 5 minutes, you can leave the room now if you don't want to be part of that. For 5 minutes, the only thing I will do is facilitate if that's necessary and if that works. And otherwise, this is your room now. This is your time.
Okay, I'm just going to stand up. Let's do this. Everybody stand up so that if someone wants to leave, it's easier to do.
Good idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can sit us down again. Yeah. Okay. And of course, let's turn off the cameras at this point.
So the no touching rule is a good example of, in this environment, it makes sense. And as you said, you can do it afterwards, and there's people doing that. And it's, for some people, touching is more comforting, and for others, it's very discomforting. So that's why there's also this rule. But it's just an example. I mean, we're not here as psychotherapists discussing group analysis, but the idea of using a specific channel or not using that, and that can be liberating. Exactly. Thank you, Jaco. So this is obviously not the environment where you want to talk about 1 hour of your personal trauma that you lived through and then cry for long times about it, as many people in these huge groups do. And it's really liberating to see that works. They will be caught up. There's people catching that and helping them, and just the group being there is comforting. So that's an interesting view on large groups, which you normally don't see. I mean, large groups are quite often scary, or can be scary, or very powerful, very energetic, and this is a different view on that. I just want to finish up with a lighter note. So, as said, the title of this is Being Candid, and I think being authentic, being yourself is an important thing, and obviously you should always be yourself, except if you can be Batman, then you should be Batman, or maybe if you can be a princess, then a princess, or as Havik was already demonstrating, if you can be a unicorn, then you should be a unicorn. But in the end, always be yourself unless you suck. Maybe then you should change something about yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We don't have time for questions. I'll just do like a super brief observation, which is that yesterday we talked a little bit about how hypocrisy is becoming increasingly difficult in the media reality that we're living in, corporate hypocrisy. But of course, that also true in many ways on an individual level. Yeah. And still, this idea of being candid and truthful in a professional situation, there's something profoundly radical about that. Which, when you think about it, which is shocking, and I think let's take that with us into the day. And we've said you're gonna have things that you can use on Monday, and I think we've covered a lot of those things. But maybe this is the most important one. If you want to bring one experiment into your workday, let it be truthfulness and honesty, and see what happens next. And don't sue us if it goes to hell. Stefan Deutsch.
Thank you.